And welcome back to Bible, Brats, and Brew with Brandon and Greg. This is part 2 of episode 2, and we're going to talk a little bit over just a recap of Exodus chapter 3, and then going into chapter 4 of Exodus up to about verse 17. And then we're going to give you our thoughts on the brats and the brew, the fun part, which you all have been waiting for. So thank you again for joining us here on Bible, Brats, and Brew with Brandon and Greg.
All right, so we left this off at chapter 3, just finished it, but do a little recap. Moses is in front of a burning bush, and God has given him this mission that God is saying, I'm going to make sure to bring my people back into the land. I will prosper them. I'm keeping my covenant promise. And he chose to do it through Moses, that Moses being sent to Pharaoh to communicate his message. And so Moses is going to have 4 different, wait a second questions. And so we covered the first 2. Moses saying wait, me? And then he said, wait, who am I supposed to say sends them? And so God has given a recap of what will be happening in the future. He said, I am Yahweh, I am unchanging, I will be with you. And then he gives a recap of all the things he's supposed to say to the people, that Pharaoh is going to reject the plan. And then it talks about, I will stretch out in verse 20 in chapter 3, I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all of my miracles, and I shall do it in the midst of it. And after that, he will let you go. And one thing I wanted to point out before we go into chapter 4 is that Pharaoh is a divine warrior in the Egyptians' belief system. That the ancient pharaohs were described as mighty of arm, and they were powerful. And the imagery of the pharaoh's arm striking their enemies was something that was culturally relevant and important. And so the fact is, God is striking down Pharaoh, and he's demonstrating that he is the true power. And so we're going to see a contest between Pharaoh and God, and it's a very one-sided contest. And so it's giving us that kind of clear imagery that's going to be happening in the future, a clear summary of what is to come. But Moses has 2 more wait a second questions. And so it says in chapter 4, verse 1, then Moses answered and said, what if they don't believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say, the Lord has not appeared to you. And the Lord said to him, what is it in your hand? And he says, a staff. Then he says, throw it on the ground. And so he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from it. But the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand and grasp it by the tail. So he stretched out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. And there's going to be 2 more signs. And the Lord furthermore said, put your hand into your bosom. And so he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then he said, put your hand into your bosom again. So he put his hand into the bosom again, and when he took it out of his bosom, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. And it shall come about that if they do not believe you or heed the witness of the first sign, they may believe the witness of the last sign. But it shall be that if they do not believe you, even these 2 signs, or heed what you say, then you shall take water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water which you take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. Then, we'll pause there. Moses was about to ask his 4th, what about this question? Right. But there's 3 different signs that are being demonstrated. This is to give Moses faith, because Moses is clearly having troubles trusting that God is going to be with him every step of the way. And so all of these signs have pretty significant relevance to the situation at hand.
Oh, for sure.
So the staff is a symbol of authority. A rod is power, especially in Egypt. It denotes authority. And so the fact is, this staff was thrown on the ground and became a snake. The Pharaoh's, I think I learned a long time ago in elementary school what the Pharaoh's hat is called. Oh man, I forgot what his name is. But it represents lower and upper Egypt, and there's a little snake that's coming out in the front. If you look at art of it, archaeological pictures and stuff, historical pictures. But this snake is representing Pharaoh, and that God has power over Pharaoh, and that
memes. Nemes?
I don't remember. It was elementary school. But all that to say, yeah, sixth grade, fifth grade, Mr. W was my teacher. We talked 2 months about Egypt. But all that to say, I remember making one of those little hats, and there's a little paper mache snake I had sticking out. But all that to say, the snake is representing that God has a true authority, that he has that transformative power to impact the staff. And then the next imagery is of what they call it leprosy in this translation, but it just means like a skin disease. Whenever it says leprosy, when we translate it in English translations, he has power over life and over health, of that arm that has that power. And the last one is that God has power over the Nile. And we talked about in the first episode that Nile is a source of life for these people.
Right.
And so with the 3 different signs, God is making clear that I have complete power of transformation, that I can change these things. And I think that transformational aspect, I think, is important too, because there needs to be a transformation of the Hebrews. They are slaves to Pharaoh. They're in this horrible condition, and so something needs to change.
Right.
And God is the one that has the power to change. He can change and have power over Pharaoh. He can have change over the power of life. He has power over the Nile. And so God is giving these 3 signs to not only provide Moses as a way to authenticate himself to these elders, that Moses' concern is, God is also striking at the heart of the issue, is that Moses is having this struggle, this lack of faith, and that he is providing these signs to encourage Moses that I am with you. I have the power. You can trust in me.
Absolutely. I mean, and just to, I don't know, make it a little more practical too, is what we're seeing is that weak instruments can be used by God, right? That's a piece of wood, a staff. How in the heck can that be turned into?
Yeah. There's no
serpent,
inherent magical abilities.
Right. There's not. It's God, right? Then so we see weak instruments that are being used by God. We see obedience. We see wonders of God. That there's no need for fear. That God aids to our faith and the divine commands of obedience from God if we want to be used as a vessel, right?
Absolutely. So Moses has one more wait a second moment, and that's in verse 10. It says, "Then Moses said to the Lord, 'Please, Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither recently nor in the time past, nor since thou hast spoken to thy servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue.'" And so scholars say that maybe he was describing having a stutter. But God's reply is, and the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him dumb or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now then go, and even I will be with you, your mouth, and teach you what you are to say." But he said, "Please, Lord, now send the message by whomever thou wilt." And so God is saying, I will be the one that communicates through you. It is I that is doing this power. I have the power over sight and hearing and sound. And I have a speech impediment. I understand, maybe a lot of people, one of the major fears is public speaking. Like more people are afraid of public speaking than death. Which talks about how scary public speaking can be. And so Moses is concerned about that. He's thinking of all of these reasons why he's not qualified, and that reasons that he shouldn't be the one that is sent. And after hearing 4 different replies from God, Moses says, "Please, Lord, now send the message by whomever thou wilt." He's saying in the most polite way, "I wish you the best of luck to find someone." Because Moses doesn't want to say no, God, but he also really wants to say no, God. He's concerned. He's scared. And so in verse 14 it says, "And the anger of the Lord burned against Moses, and he said, 'Is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks fluently, and moreover, behold, he is coming out to meet you, where he sees you, and he'll be glad in his heart. And you are to speak to him, and the words of his mouth, and I, even I, will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. Moreover, he shall speak to you for all of the people, and it shall come about that he shall be a mouth for you, and you shall be God to him. And you shall take in your hand the staff with which you shall perform the signs." And that's the end of the conversation between Moses and the burning bush. God God burning a little bit with a little anger and saying that I will be using you, Moses, that you are the chosen vessel, that you are weak, and that's not a problem because I will work through you. And so all of these concerns, the lack of faith that Moses is amplifying, this fear of public speaking, that he's not going to be able to do the job, the fear that people are not going to respond well to him, because the last time he tried to intervene, his fellow Hebrews like criticized him and warned him like, oh, well, you killed someone, you're going to kill me. And so he has all of these concerns. He's not this hot-headed person he was 40 years ago traditionally.
Right.
He is an old man. He recognizes that he's weak and he wants this mission accomplished, but he doesn't think it's going to be through him. And so he has all these concerns, but God is saying, I will be with you, that I am Yahweh. I am never changing it. I am going to fulfill my covenant promise through your actions, and that these are signs that will demonstrate that I will be with you, that I am going to be all my power will be struck against Pharaoh. He struck down the Israelites, but I shall strike down him. And so we see God demonstrating his faithfulness, his patience, his power, and that is going to be working through Moses to become this incredible figure in the Old Testament who is just like us. He is afraid. He doesn't know what to do. He is thinking of excuses about not doing
Always
what God
making
works.
excuses. How many times do we make excuses?
Absolutely. And so this is a perfect place where we can do some transitions to some application.
Yeah, let's do that.
I definitely relate to Moses, and I think we all can relate to Moses,
absolutely.
that we are weak, that I remember when I was right out of high school, I went to Bible college and I was going to take on the world and I was going to conquer everything. And then I really got hit by real life and be like, wow, this life is a lot harder and there isn't right answers all the time. And our plans sometimes just don't work out, and maybe most of the time don't work out. And so
tell me about it.
Moses having this ambition and then realizing that life is not working out his way. And so he's probably at this point content with what's happening, that he's not a part of these worlds anymore. But God is saying, I am going to use you. And I know the hesitancy that I could be involved, that can be a scary step, that he's going back to a land that he was a wanted criminal, where he was rejected by the Egyptians, rejected by his people. He's afraid of rejection. I understand that a lot. And so I think there's a couple of major applications we can take from this. Moses did go. He trusted in God. His faith was weak. It was flawed, but it was real and genuine. And so we know that when we have real and genuine faith, it doesn't have to be perfect.
No.
But it does have to look to God and seek
Absolutely.
him. And because Moses did that, God worked through Moses in such a powerful way that Moses is one of the most important figures in Judaism, in Christianity, because of through his obedience, even if it was through flawed obedience and flawed faith, God worked that to an amazing end.
Absolutely.
So I think that's an encouragement that for us, that we are like Moses. We have a weak faith. We have weak obedience, but we can everly increase our obedience and love.
Absolutely.
And step out in faith.
Well, it's like a pilgrimage, right? It's a journey. It's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, no, we don't have to start acing it right away. This is a progress, is what we're called to.
Because if you aced it right away, then what need for faith would you have? None. Absolutely none.
So we see that. And I think the other application is we just see how faithful God is, that he is patient, that he is with them every step of the way. And I think we can forget that God is with us. And so we might be serving at a church or doing our life, and we forget that God is the source of our power, that God is the source of our encouragement. And whether we're going through ups or downs, we can trust in that Yahweh, that he is always who he is.
That is
faithful and loving.
That is so important, Brandon. I'm glad that you made that part, or that point, that we can forget at times, because I know I'm guilty of that, forgetting that God is always with me. Because when life gets hard, when challenges and hardships come up, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of listeners on here that are going through the hardships and challenges and trials of life, but when it gets to be real heavy, it's kind of a weird situation, to be in, because you forget to look to God, which that seems very unnatural, but at the same time, it's natural for the flesh, right? Don't look at sinful flesh doesn't look at God. So
yeah, the core issue.
Yeah, it's a very core issue. Yeah, we look to ourselves. So to deny the flesh and look to Christ, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? But Moses is the perfect example of that. And I appreciate that you brought that up because, I needed that reminder too. So thank you so much. I mean, that's a blessing for everybody listening, that reminder that you just said. So thank you for that.
What applications do you see in the text that you want to pull out? There's so much. I wish we had longer that we could talk about this.
Right.
What stands out to you?
The big thing is I want to point out obedience. Even when there's an excuse that comes out of the flesh, there's still obedience on Moses' point that he wants to do what the Lord wants, right? But he's still going to give. He's in that spiritual battle between flesh and spiritual obedience, and it's not an easy place to be in. And I would say that's where a lot of modern, if we're going to try to tie in and bridge this gap between ancient culture and audience to modern culture and audience in the church, I think that we can relate in the sense that obedience is one of the hardest things that we could ever do. It's one of the hardest applications that we could ever make because it calls us to deny temporal pleasures of the world. So that may be eating out. It may be.
Are you saying we shouldn't be eating brats and brews?
Brat and brew. I'm just saying, hey, it's right here. I'm calling us both out for this, right? It's a spade, right, bud? And it may be going on a vacation. It may be buying sports cards. It may be, getting the higher package on your, internet or dish TV, whatever it is, But the ability to say it's okay to deny those things and live contently so that you can have a quietness to hear God, to walk in obedience, that's okay. Because Moses really teaches that. And I would say that's one of the biggest applications that I've taken from this is obedience and the willingness to give anything up at any moment, right? And I've really been working on that too. And it's not easy to just be willing to give up anything at any moment.
Yeah.
But it's very transformative. I'll tell you that because I've really challenged myself on some of this stuff and it's really transformed me and I'm thankful for it. Not fun, but it's worth it.
Yeah, no,
right?
I could boil it down to like, what excuses are you making?
Right.
And how do we confront that? Now, God was confronting Moses, but we're in a position where we need to be able to confront ourselves and confront each other.
Yep, that's the hardest thing to do.
Which is a powerful. One thing I really appreciate in this story is that you're really seeing the forces of the earth representing like Pharaoh and like his power versus God's, and we're going to see that a lot in the next episode. We're going to be talking about the plagues, and we're going to see this like fight between these two forces, and I'm really looking forward to talking about that too. But before we wrap this up, we really need to talk about these because I got to say I'm going to go first because this root beer. You might have heard me burp a couple of times. This root beer was refreshing, and it's affecting me in a real powerful way. It has a really rich flavor, but what I really appreciated about the most is like the aftertaste, like the finish.
The finish.
You connoisseurs call it. It has like a really sweet aftertaste, like not like overpowering, but like it's just very refreshing. Like it's not too powerful. It doesn't hit you in the face, but like you drink it, it's rich, and then like it just has a pleasant aftertaste. Like, I don't know, like we talked about, like the sweet syrup from dates. I don't know if those dates can compare to this. This is, I really like this root beer. I think it's one of my favorites.
And it's not just like a root beer or anything. Even a small craft, beer like this that I'm drinking today, the finish on it can go from something that's very enjoyable to something that's so acidic in the finish that you don't enjoy and you don't want to pick it back up. So to really catch on to that whole finish of a product like that is a big thing, and it makes it enjoyable, right? Because that's the whole point of this is, enjoy what you do have because it's a gift, and don't abuse it, whatever it is.
But
so yeah, the finish is
don't leave us
super
on
important.
a cliffhanger. Was yours a good finish?
Actually, yeah. This it's so funny, the name. I just think it's hilarious. North Coast old Rasputin Russian Imperial Stout. It's a dark, and I do like dark brews. I really do. They're rich, but sometimes they can be too heavy at times. And by that I mean the flavor is just, it's so intense that it just overpowers everything, and you don't even get a moment to enjoy what you're actually tasting, and you can't